Ba, ba, ba. So as you can see, it's NewsReal with me and not Neil again this week because Neil's AWOL again. I only have, as you can see, his spirit animal again with me this week. Although I don't think I'm really gonna. I mean, I don't think I should put up with that. I really need to get Neil here because it's just no good without him. I mean, we need him here as well. So I'm gonna call on the spirit animal to try and contact Neil and maybe manifest him somewhere or other here. So go ahead, Neil's unicorn spirit animal, please bring him here. Teleport him here. Do whatever. Go. Sparkles, 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 and oh my God, it worked. Neil, you're here, and your spirit animal. Don't let that spirit animal out of your sight. It's very useful.
Enough of this.
Enough of that nonsense. Put him there. There you go. He needs a good rest. He did a lot of work last week when you weren't here.
Look at all the books he read.
I know. Yeah, it was very busy last week. Needs a rest, definitely. So you have to wreck the place. You have to make up for lost time by bringing the hardcore truthiness to.
Did she behave last week?
She.
Yeah.
Is that why it was?
Well, your spirit animal is your opposite, you know. And
Is
together you make a whole.
Really?
Yeah, I think so. But even with her, like, apparently the levels of toxic masculinity here last week were just too much for some
I
viewers.
saw that. Yeah. So you're going to bring a lot of femininity to it this week, yeah.
Well, a bit of balance to the force, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
With your big bushy beard?
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, right, like bearded lady. So, yeah.
He's the
Okay.
bearded lady. Yes.
Did Pixie say anything
Pixie, okay.
lewd or
She
offensive,
thought,
Oh.
controversial?
I forgot to change the camera for the height of. Yeah. Let's.
oh yeah.
It's
Maybe
okay,
you
I'll
should-
just sink a bit. There we go.
There you go. You look like a short
Leprechaun.
little
Yeah.
leprechaun now. Yeah.
Okay. So, well, I pay her to be controversial, so she didn't say anything.
Not a thing, but thought a lot of things. I was reading a lot of thoughts from that side of the table last week.
She stay there.
Yeah, there you go. Perfect.
Hang on, I'm getting back up. There we go.
And yeah, so
Nuclear Armageddon, Joe.
I like the body position of the spirit animal. Yes, you do. Okay, yeah. It's very relaxing, that body position. What? We're just talking about relaxing body positions, and you say, what? Nuclear Armageddon? Nuclear Armageddon? What do you mean by that? What are you trying to say? It's all over the news. Well, it has been for quite a while, no? It's in the background. It's just like a vague fear in the background that is being promoted by certain peoples or certainly
Yeah.
thought about. Well, some people's
It's always a
minds, no?
subtext, but occasionally it's wielded against people. People they'll know that if they reflect back, like after 9/11, ginning up war support to invade Iraq. It was mushroom clouds over U.S. cities from morning to night. The implication being Saddam could nuke us at any time. The 45 minutes to
Well, that was the UK, yeah.
they both did it. It was all across the networks in the United States. So that's obvious manipulation to, scare people. But it's always been a subtext, of course, since the entire nuclear age that it could happen. There was a Cuban Missile Crisis in 1962. And then recently people have, whether they're partisan ideologues, Eastern or Western, or whether they're just fairly sound observers, they have made comparisons to this point in time being similar to the 1962 Cuban Missile Crisis. With one important difference, at least at the surface level, the level of official narratives. Both sides in this aren't trying not to do it. One of them seems to be like escalating.
Yeah.
So that's why I want to talk about it, because a lot of people in the alternative would suggest that this is not being discussed enough, that people are not being warned enough about how serious the situation is. Hence, their general apathy towards the issue at all, or towards politics and what's going on in their world at all. So they're like sleepwalking. It's the kind of Cassandra's warn that people in general are sleepwalking into their doom, nuclear holocaust of some form or another.
Yeah.
We have generally been kind of dismissive or aloof from the topic, and we have our reasons for it. Do we want to state them, cover them briefly? Or do we want to... maybe we should lead with what happened in the news this week that has me thinking about this. I sent you 3 items, Scotty. The first one's the AP report. This was widely reported, so it doesn't have to be the AP article. May 6th, 2 days ago, U.S. government, I suppose, gave intel before Ukraine sank Russian warship. As we said when it happened, the sinking of the Moskva did not just happen because Ukraine, was awesome and managed to strike the Russian Black Sea flagship. They clearly had help. And there were signals at the time because everyone was like, Ukraine, it was bizarre. Even that nutcase ideologue advisor of Zelensky's was being like very cagey. When asked about it, told CNN, well, we're not sure. Let's just wait and see what other sources say. So he was taking his cues from someone else. It was a full 48 hours before the Pentagon, the White House, Kiev, and others lined up behind the same story. That meant something unusual had happened. That's what that told us. Also, of course, the fact that the Russians themselves also gave cagey explanation. Initially, it's fine, we're towing it back to port. Oops, it sank in stormy weather. There was no stormy weather. So what's striking about this, of course, is it's usually years or decades before somebody gloats.
Yeah.
Or there's some reason to... It's dug up in the archives. It's declassified, whatever. This is 2 weeks after the event. They're boasting about it.
Well, they're probably still limited hangout though, that as well, because they give more than intel, probably. Far more than intel.
That's definitely the subtext of this. It's like the weapon, the people firing the weapon, the whole hand was inside the Ukrainian glove. I mean, it was an American operation painted in blue and yellow.
Yeah. You go through the process of that, and if you're the one who's providing the intel, you're obviously providing weapons and all that kind of stuff. Why would you bother like putting the whole package together and then having a bunch of Ukrainians you've only just met or something, only recently met, have them do it? Why would
Who've never used it before?
Why would you leave it to chance? It's the high likelihood is that it was a fully a US operation,
100%.
Just on the same topic, put up that Penta JPEG I sent you, Scotty. It's just an example of the, we did but we didn't type thing. This was another one where it's from a few days ago. U.S. intelligence is helping Ukraine kill Russian generals, officials say. That's in the New York Times. And then another website, Axios, a day later, Pentagon denies U.S. is providing Ukrainian intel to kill Russian generals. Because that's I suppose that's maybe going a bit too far, where they're, deliberately responsible for the deaths of Russian generals. That's pushing too far towards the word, directly at war and openly doing it,
And there's another subtext here. Just as we only provided the intelligence for Ukraine to sink the ship, understates the U.S. role. In this case, we helped kill U.S. generals, overstates, or Russian generals, overstates that matter, because I know of at least 4 of the 7 they claim were killed are all alive and well, and operational.
Yeah.
The other 3, maybe one's dead, I don't know.
Yeah.
So the subtext is it's more BS, but you get the conflicting stories because who is saying what, which brings me to the next one. As soon as the AP and others published that information that the U.S. Remember that headline just said U.S. So you're like, well, Biden signed off on it. Let's look at the next one. NBC News, same day, or was it the same day, May 6th? What date is it? Can you scroll down a little? I'm curious if it was a day later.
May
7th, a day later. Okay, back to the headline. Biden told officials media reports about U.S. intel sharing with Ukraine are counterproductive. One official said Biden conveyed that the leak should stop, i.e. the Biden White House didn't do this, the CIA did this. The CIA sank the Russian flagship. just confirms what we know. I mean, it's so in your face now. I don't know how anyone can not make that distinction anymore. Well, obviously, we went through 6 years of the deep state, clearly a fact at this point.
Yeah. Well, even the mention that the US provided intel to sink the Moskva, it's a pretty kind of negative commentary on Ukrainian abilities. Well, they can't even get their own intel on a ship that's 60 kilometers off their coast. The Ukrainians can't provide their own intel. They have to use CIA or American intel. It shows just how in control and how infused within the entire operation the US is. They're directing pretty much all of it. You know, the only thing that Ukraine is providing is manpower for the ground war type thing, but all of the rest,
grunts,
the
cannon fodder. Well, all the radar stations were knocked out.
Right.
They have no AWACS in the air.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, and it will be done. It will be done and dusted long before now. But the West
that shouldn't have
us,
happened, given what Russia did to Ukraine's military infrastructure.
Right, for sure. Yeah.
So that it happened just again
Says
speaks
that
to
it
the
was
fact
somebody
that
else.
CIA did it.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
and that was quickly followed by the last one I want to show. I mean, they make intimations like this all the time, the Russian government, but this was at least reported in the West and linked with the leak, in quotes. Russia ambassador to US says NATO is not taking nuclear war threats seriously. That's it. That's basically it, the headline. So is that true, so to speak? The US is not taking nuclear war seriously. Like the risk of it drifting or escalating or a decision being made, conscious or otherwise, or automated. I don't know if there are fail-safe, or rather, if it's not 100% fail-safe, where some AI goes detecting incoming and just launches something, and it's been spoofed. That could happen too. Okay, so the first thing is that clearly here, the real government of the United States, which is not the senile guy in the White House, as they themselves just laid out with that leak followed by, please don't do that, it feels they can act with impunity. So you know what I mean? I'm not suggesting the Americans have crossed the nuclear Rubicon. I'm saying it's getting fuzzier, possibly. That Russian government warning is like, is somebody over there knocking on the head? Is there anybody home? How far do we want to go with this, though, in suggesting that this is possible for...
I think despite Russia's, like, the talk about Russia's awesome new weapons and all that kind of stuff that can't be defeated, blah, 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 I think mutually assured destruction still holds sway, as it always has. That doesn't mean that they couldn't, in theory, they're always testing the boundaries. Even in Ukraine right now, the US is testing the boundaries or pushing the boundaries of what it can do against Russia or against any other enemy in the name of someone else, or with someone else holding the knife, or in this case, how much suffering or how much damage it can inflict on Russia and the Russian military and on Russia itself, with the border crossings into Russia, the attacks across the border. They're testing to see how far they can go, without provoking any kind of a direct response from the. I mean, certainly the Russians probably know that the Moskva was sunk by an American missile. They probably have come to that conclusion themselves. So America, as far as the Russian government is concerned, America directly sank the flagship of the Russian Black Sea Fleet. And crickets. So it just shows you
they can absorb a lot.
The extent,
but
the size of the amount of leeway that is available there, and it's understood by both sides. It's understood to not be in their interest to talk about that, not be in their interest, not in the Russian government's interest, obviously, because they haven't talked about it, to accuse the US of doing that.
Imagine
if the shoe was on the other foot.
If the shoe was on the other foot, and Peskov and not Kirby didn't know. He was genuinely like, well, the Russians say that, it caught fire, explosives went off, and they started towing it back to port. So that's what I'm going with. If Peskov is giving that explanation, and then someone from behind him leaks to the press, 2 weeks later, actually, we, the Russians, basically sunk that ship. The thing is, in that situation, you previously gave them an out. In the real world situation, the United States, CIA, gave Russia an out to just absorb it and not have to
Yeah,
in
by
quotes,
making it covert.
retaliate.
By making it covert,
Yeah.
by doing it covertly.
But if you then go and tell the world that you did it,
Well, it gets leaked out, yeah, and they don't officially say that's true. No, there's no official statement. There's no official gloating, whatever. But it's in the press, right? It's speculated, and the press getting that with their inside sources in intel communities, they put stories out like that because they're interesting and they get it's clickbait, right? But it's kind of interesting because if the shoe was on the other foot and Russia sank an American ship. I mean, I know it's not exactly the exact opposite situation or the exact equivalent, but America would be all over it. America would be, front and center accusing Russia of having done this and saber rattling and saying there would be consequences and there'd be more sanctions or whatever else. You know what I mean? There's a declaration of war. Like, I mean, America has no problem, as we saw on 9/11 and on different occasions with the wars that they've been involved in, using extremely bellicose rhetoric against their enemy, But Russia doesn't do that, because Russia's playing a different game, I suppose. And yeah, but yeah, the Americans would be all over it. Anybody sink an American ship, the outrage, they'd be whipping up national patriotic sentiment, and they'd be calling for Russian blood left, right, and center.
I think they would hit back. I think they would hit a ship or equivalent.
Yeah.
Or more, a base or something.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, fair's fair, But unfortunately, there are no American ships in the Black Sea.
At the moment,
Right.
There's something in the Med though, surely at this
Yeah.
time. Yeah. Historically, MAD has kept the two locked in,
Mm-hmm.
so that since 1962 certainly. So what follows from this mutually assured destruction is an understanding that everything short of that is kosher.
Don't put neither.
Dirty tactics.
Neither party puts the other in a position where they have no choice, where they feel compelled to use them. Now, America used them for shits and giggles in 1945 in Hiroshima and Nagasaki, right? But no country today, I think, would use nuclear weapons. At least the main, nuclear powers. None of them would use them unless, as the Russians have been clear about, unless they felt that it was required to protect their existence, basically, to protect their.
Putin said that explicitly.
lives.
That is Russian strategic doctrine.
Yeah.
The viability of the state has to be in question
Right.
to use them.
Yeah. But that's the same for.
And that's-
But that's where mutual assured destruction comes in. The viability of the state. The same is true for the Brits, for the French, for the Americans,
Chinese.
for the Chinese, etc. Because the viability of the state is in question if you use them.
Right. So don't use them.
So everybody
use them first.
everybody decides not to use them first, so then nobody uses them. So it's funny to see in the media, all the kind of talking heads, just like they put it out. The media puts it out there, and then other talking heads who should know better, or other social media influencers, or people on Twitter, or whatever you want to call them, put it out there as people who should know better, and at least up until now have shown an ability for some critical thinking. Just throw that out there as as a bit of fear mongering, or as some emotional ploy or something. I don't know what they're doing, but there's no proper thinking behind it in the way that we've done it. Anybody who goes through the process knows, through the analytical process, knows that nuclear war is not going to happen in the modern age.
Even
Why do you think they're putting so much effort into this war in the way that they're putting it into it? And why do you think America has put so much effort, and the Brits and French, etc., put so much effort into wars in Syria, for example, where they're not officially at war with the Syrian government, but a bunch of jihadis running around with M16s and American anti-tank weapons
and Toyota pickups in Texas.
They're the ones who are at war with. So, I mean,
Okay.
It's all covert, you know what I mean? And that was decided on a long time ago, you know, that modern warfare would be engaged in covertly, you know.
Do you think? Okay, that underscores all of this. Do you think though that the U.S. regime? Do you ever wonder if they're not nuts enough or becoming more unhinged that they could seriously consider doing something crazy? Like here
What's something crazy?
well, if not nuking first, directly attacking Russia,
Mm-hmm.
military targets.
Mm-hmm.
And when, if and when Russia responds with same, will the U.S. just go, okay, well, fair dues, you smacked us here, we smacked you there,
Mm-hmm.
or will it provoke escalatory because they want to maintain dominance? NATO unity, U.S. superpower status is dependent on the image that no one dare smack up.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Not publicly, not officially. But of course, like I think I was saying this to you earlier on, prior to the Moskva, if you want a rationale, obviously it was a propaganda win in and of itself to sink the flagship of the Russian Black Sea Fleet. But prior to that, you had on several occasions you had Russia bombing, firing missiles and at training centres
Yeah.
that they described more or less as NATO training centres on Ukrainian territory, with Ukrainian NATO member state personnel, military personnel, officers and stuff, and there were
that was
large,
implied, but
large
no one admitted it.
right, large numbers of people killed. So of course nobody admitted it, but you can assume that that's the case, right? That at least in the past 2.5 months, that on at least one or two occasions, NATO operatives have been caught with their pants down. Now, is that seen as an attack on? When you talk about NATO, you mean the US, effectively. So is that seen as an attack by Russia on the US? And does the US then feel that they're justified in attacking back in a, asymmetrical but similar way, i.e., the sinking of the Moskva? And is that how it's all's fair in war and dodgeball?
That's how the Americans could and probably do see it. Then it's counter-strike,
Right.
not as it seems when
Which
we're
would-
looking at the outside as
Yeah.
a crazy escalation.
Which would be why Russia swallowed it. It's almost okay. So okay, we were pretty happy whenever we hit those NATO training centers and stuff, and it must have been pretty difficult for you to deal with that. So okay, you hit the Moskva, fair enough. We won't let that happen again, but fair enough.
I hear you. There's still a
not personal,
There's
it's
still
not
a
personal.
qualitative difference. One is a NATO training center that officially has no NATO personnel in it, i.e., no Americans.
Except it does.
Except it does. But the American population doesn't then get news flash for a day or 305 with, American flagship, whatever, X, completely destroyed, dozens dead.
But that's because
Russia did
that's
it.
Control of the media. The Western domination of obviously the Western media, but to a large extent the global media, or to have the ear of the global audience, and have had it for a long time. That's their privilege.
In shaping reality.
Yeah, and in building up their media to have such a widespread, they get to dominate the discourse. Of course, the discourse is, especially around this Ukrainian situation, is almost entirely false. And that false narrative that's put out there can help to keep the population at home on side, although they're not doing very well at that. Keep the Ukrainian population on side, keep them supporting the war, keep the Ukrainian troops supporting the war. So all of those lies in the media and distortions of what's actually happening are good from that point of view, but they don't affect the course of the war in terms of what Russia's doing. Like, no matter how, like, as we talked previously, no matter how many times they say Russia's losing this war, that is not going to cause Russia to lose the war. Except they think that it might, in the sense that if we keep saying Russia's losing, Russia's on the back foot, Putin's being criticized by his generals and his advisors. He's failing, he's ill, he's sick. That they think may contribute to Russia possibly losing the war if that kind of talk or those kind of messages embolden the Ukrainian military to keep fighting. Because the bottom line is, if the Ukrainian military gets to the point where they collapse for whatever reason, either through being attacked and blown up basically by the Russian military, or them losing morale, something spreading, a contagion of low morale spreading throughout the Ukrainian military. If they all have one day all wake up and say, "What the hell are we doing here? This is ridiculous," then it's over.
Yeah. And if that isn't helping on the ground in Ukraine, then I suppose a secondary hope or target, if achievable, is that it has an effect on morale within Russia and reaches
Also,
a point where it takes,
Yeah.
and there's a coup d'etat against Putin or mass protests and the government falls or something.
So yeah, like we've talked about, the information war and propaganda war is very important, and it's seen as very important by America, especially America, and for good reason. It's not reality creation, but it does have a tangible effect, a real world effect, or it can have a real world effect if it works, if it takes root. But yeah, it doesn't. Like we said, it doesn't. When they say Russia has lost the war, Russia is retreating, that doesn't mean Russia's retreating. That just means the media says that Russia's retreating.
Okay, so no nuclear Armageddon.
Yeah. No.
Not in Ukraine, not as a result of Ukraine
No.
and conflicting US-Russian interests there.
You can't even use I mean, it depends what you mean by nuclear war. Nuclear war.
I mean, it's the point of an escalation to the point where, well, I suppose on the US
all-out
side,
war, there's no, you're not like, you can't be a bit pregnant and you can't have a bit of nuclear war. It's all or nothing, right? Because it escalates by definition. If you mean that, then no. I would leave open the possibility that someone might. I don't even know if this is possible, but the only thing I would leave open is a possibility that someone might use kind of a lower yield nuclear device somewhere. But again, that's dangerous because it can be interpreted by the other side as well. You've actually opened the door to nuclear war, so we're going to respond in kind. So, and I don't know where that would. Maybe it can't be low enough yield that it doesn't have the desired effect, right? So it has to be high enough yield where it actually one's enough type thing,
what about one in Washington? Would that just? No, it wouldn't, because they've rigged it so that.
Oh yeah.
That's the nature of math. It's all
Yeah.
rigged so that it does counter strike straight away.
And if a nuke goes off in Washington D.C., if it's a missile or whatever, or, there's going to be no question about who did it.
About
right?
who did it at this point in time.
Right.
Okay, so we'll return to the Ukraine war, but would you ever imagine a scenario where
China does it.
or a cooperation? The US is going around pissing so many people off. Like this trajectory, this could be decades out. So my scenario is separate from what's going on now. Like, I don't know. It has been said of a certain other country in the world that they have a, quote, Samson option.
Mm-hmm.
If they perceive that their big dogs are not being cooperative, never mind their enemies, which are a lot of other countries, they have ways and means, specifically nuclear-powered submarines armed with nuclear warheads.
Who does?
Israel.
Yeah.
Are they the only ones who put it out, as one of their own people once said? I forget who it was, maybe ex-Mossad general or something. Israel should be like a mad dog to others so that they don't even try to test us,
Mm-hmm.
We just bark aggressively, snarl at them first. Act first, every time. I see a situation longer term where the US is no longer rationally playing game theory with this, you know,
Yeah.
where they just lash out. But anyway, that's totally out there. It's for now.
I think that's not the problem that's facing humanity, like they're facing the people on this planet. You know, it's the encroaching, ongoing energy, food, economic issues, basically, that are growing and inexorably moving in that direction. Over the next year, 18 months, it's going to get pretty bad. I know lots of people have been saying that and stuff, but it probably is, But people have been acclimatized to it. You notice this period, and it happens all the time, where people are acclimatized to a new reality. Say like that. I don't know if it's put in place, but it starts to happen, and no one stops it. It's allowed to continue on. Of course, the energy crisis and the food production crisis is being seriously exacerbated is being exacerbated by the situation in Ukraine in many different ways, and the US and its allies are attempting to prolong that, with the net result that they will create a worse energy and food crisis as time progresses. But people already are getting used to the idea of, their bills are going up a little bit here, food's going up a little bit here. There's certain things maybe you're having difficulty getting in different places. It's just drip, drip, slowly, everybody gets the message, and then, you accommodate, you adjust to the new reality a little bit, and then they make it a little bit worse and a little bit worse and a little bit worse, It's like, sleepwalking in a way, and bringing people along to the point where they've normalized everything. They've normalized. I wouldn't be surprised if people normalize. There is no uprising or no, riots or anything like that in a situation where people are, like in Germany, who are shutting off their, have no power or whatever, lighting candles and are taking cold showers to say, take that Putin and stuff. Not that they'll be saying, take that Putin, but they'll just accept it,
Sure, it's just the way of the world.
Yeah.
I often get the sense from people who harp on and on about the threat of nuclear apocalypse. You don't understand. You don't understand that they know, maybe a part of them knows deep down, there's a kind of slow motion doomsday scenario unfolding, and they just want it to end quickly.
Yeah, get on with it.
Kind of a nihilistic, like just get it over.
Yeah. There was a great thing. Lavrov's, awesome. Anybody who has any sense understands that Lavrov is probably one of the best, foreign ministers in the world, one of the best politicians in the world has been for a very long time. But he said something recently. It was on RT online, and I think it was RT Arabic or something like that. But anyway, it's on Twitter. One of the Twitter links sent you, sorry, Shahzadazif. It's, 24 seconds, and it's awesome because he just sums up the problem. Not the problem, but he sums up the situation in 24 seconds. And that's, in a certain sense, that's all you need to know. People just need to understand what he says, or listen to what he says, and think about it, and boom, you have answers, the answer or answers to many, many different questions that you might have about this situation.
If you cannot sleep because of Russia-Ukrainian conflict, there are some advices to calm you down. First, imagine that this is happening in Africa. Imagine this is happening in the Middle East. Imagine Ukraine is Palestine. Imagine Russia is the United States.
Boom. And go back to not caring.
Yeah.
Go back to not caring, like you've always not cared when it's been in that configuration.
Yeah, when the
instead
world,
of it's Russia,
when the world was great.
Yeah, and when everything was great and everybody was living hand in hog and everything was fantastic and there were no problems apart from climate change. But yeah, just take the word Russia from all the news cycles today and put US, and take Ukraine, or even just leave it as Ukraine. Just change Russia for the US, and then fill in the narratives that justify it, because that's what you did in every single war that the US has waged or been involved in over the past 20, 25 years. That's what you did. You had a positive spin on it. So put your positive spin on it. There you go, and then you go back to sleep.
Or Palestine.
He said.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Given what else he said this week.
You don't care about Palestine. You don't care
Right.
about what Israel. You've never cared what Israel is doing in Palestine. So don't care about this either. What's the difference, really? How can there be sure there's moral equivalency there. You know what I mean? For people, people
Yeah.
don't think.
I think it was the same interview he gave where he said this. He got himself in hot water. Not from that comment, but this one. About Hitler's ancestry.
Людей на востоке Украины, чтобы им не грозила ни милитаризация этой страны, ни нацификация этой страны, и чтобы с территории Украины не исходили угрозы безопасности Российской Федерации. Но то, что аргумент он выдвигает, какая может быть у нас нацификация, когда я еврей, я, если правильно помню, боюсь ошибиться, но, по-моему, у Гитлера тоже была еврейская кровь. Это абсолютно ничего не значит. И мы уже давно слышали мудрый еврейский народ, который говорит, что самые ярые антисемиты, как правило, евреи.
You can stop it there, Scott. Cue outrage
Yeah.
in the media.
Putin apologized to the Israeli Prime Minister for that on a telephone conversation, apparently. But throw up that article, the article I just sent you, Scotty. You have to get rid of a few pop-up windows, whatever. But who's that? Oh, look, there's Putin.
Oh, that's that's an older article, right? Studies suggest Adolf Hitler had Jewish and African ancestors.
Well, what Lavrov said there was like, carried in the media over the past week as Lavrov says
Hitler was Jewish.
Hitler was Jewish. Of course, it's a bit of a black and white take on it, but the fact of the matter is it's been well known among historians for a long time that it's possible that Hitler had some Jewish ancestry. Now, so for Lavrov to cite that in the context in which he cited it, which was as a pushback against all these claims about, how can you be denazifying Ukraine when the prime minister or the president of Ukraine is Jewish himself? Well, it's like, dude, it's not so simple. What kind of you live in unicorn world, like where it's just goodies and baddies all the time, and everything's binary, simple, black or white. It's obviously not. So, yeah.
For what it's worth, there were rumors that Hitler had Jewish ancestry at the time. They grew after the war. Those were refuted in historical studies that just tried to go based on records, family tree. It is known that his grandfather, Alois Hitler, I think his surname was the birth of an illegitimate, not marriage, just a one-night stand.
But a maid in a Rothschild house?
That's one rumor, but the more realistic one, again, these are all refuted and counterclaims up the wazoo, disproving, because it is circumstantial. When you're just looking at family tree stuff, the counterclaim was I can't remember. Anyway, it was refuted. But that History.com article is different. That's going on genetic studies that were done on two of his descendants, one living in Europe and one living in the United States. That thing about African, I don't think it's African. The History.com article says the two relatives in question, their most dominant haplogroup is rare in Western Europeans, but common among North Africans and particularly tribes in Morocco, Algeria, Libya, and Tunisia. It's also one of the major founding lineages of the Jewish population, particularly in the Sephardic Jews, who, of course, were found mostly in North Africa, right? So it's not that he had Jewish and African. Right. There's a Jewish signal in his family tree for sure, and it's a strong one. Like a third.
He was
a
super
quarter
diverse.
to a third of his genes are Jewish.
Yeah, he was super diverse. Well, long before it was cool to be diverse.
So that is actually a fact. Well, it's at least very possible.
Well, it's
and
a
then
reasonable
they shot
thing
all
to-
over Lavrov all week long
Yeah.
about that comment. But in fairness, though, it is just something you don't want to go there.
No.
So he might not have said that if he thought better of it.
Yeah.
But when you're Lavrov and you're taking this shit all day long, like,
Finally,
how
just
do you
wanna
not like
silence
step
it,
on
yeah.
someone's toes and just shout something back at them?
Yeah. For sure.
Israel said it's unforgivable,
Mm-hmm.
and then they forgave him when Putin called Bennett. So yeah, There's that. Yeah. So
Uh,
where do you want to go next? I mean,
Victory Day tomorrow.
Victory Day today in Europe. Not that anyone even remembers anymore, although it is usually a holiday in France. Today is Sunday.
When your man Hitler gave up.
Yeah. The last days in Berlin.
Yeah.
Um,
Time.
it's funny how that it's remembered less and less.
Not in Russia.
Not in Russia. And the West and Russia have diverged.
Mm-hmm.
You know what's become a bigger day, actually, in the last 15 years? D-Day.
Mm.
The Americans, I think, and possibly the British, are keen to accentuate June 6th, 1944 Normandy landing over anything else.
As if that was a victory, yeah.
Because that was all them,
Exactly.
you know? And you can just
Make it all about them.
completely exclude all the rest. Stalingrad, the turnaround.
Especially the Russians, exclude them. Yeah.
Does anyone know who the main general was who destroyed the Nazi war machine? No, it's Marshal Zhukov. Zhukov should be a household name in the West.
Yeah.
Never heard of him.
Not allowed. Well, tomorrow's Victory Day, May 9th, Victory Day in Russia. It's a big celebration. There's a big military parade and stuff in Moscow. They're planning for it. There's also some some people are suggesting that the Ukis may be trying, in terms of, in the context of hand in glove, American hand in the Ukrainian glove, that tomorrow they may try to do something to spoil the Victory Day celebrations. You know, that the marking of that day by the Russians, that they may try to do something pretty nasty.
Yeah, the Russian MOD formally put out a statement. They have intelligence that they have specific data, so they may use that. The Ukis may use those Tochka U cluster munitions that we know have been used in Donetsk for sure, and Kramatorsk was a Kramatorsk railway station. How fast they dropped that story as a Russian atrocity when, like, the Italian film crew revealed that the serial number on the side of the damn weapon was Ukrainian. So they may try to do some atrocity. And the crowded places in Lvov, so that's firmly under Western Ukrainian Kiev control. And Volnoskaya regions, possibly something in the DPR and elsewhere.
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah, there's not much.
Another atrocity that they warn about is that Ukrainian nationalist battalions dressed in Russian military uniform plan to fire at residential homes from armored vehicles marked with the Z sign.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, there's not much more they can do than they've already done. I mean, how much more can you demonize Russia as, evil, aggressor, killing civilians, etc., 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 all the stuff that people have been, subjected to over the past 2.5 months. How much more of that can you do? Or is it worth doing? I mean, when people are already saturated with it, people have got the message.
Yeah.
What's the gain from adding more? Is there something worse? Chemical weapon attack, maybe or causing some kind of chemical weapon attack, maybe bombing the Ukrainians or the Americans or somebody bombing a chemical weapons, storage site in Ukraine, causing, large numbers of deaths or something. Would that stop Russia? No. Would it make Russia look even worse than it already is? Probably. Would it have any effect? Would anybody care? Probably not. How many bads do you put on? How many other adjectives are there for bad and evil and aggressor? Can you add into? Can you prefix the word Russia with? Or Putin? Evil, bad, nasty, rotten, devilish.
Antichrist. Literally Hitler.
Putin. How many? I mean, there's war weariness type thing. There's war propaganda weariness that starts to set in. And again, the normalization aspect of it, where it's, oh look, there's a war going on in Ukraine. If this extends on another 6 months, you're thinking like 3 or 4 months, and nobody's going to really care, except for the diehard people who are really like into it and trying their best to either, reveal what's going on, or the pro-Ukrainian side that are, still, flying the flag for Ukraine. I mean, the vast majority of people already don't care, especially in Western countries. Don't really know very much about it, don't follow it, just get the odd headline and have let it go. people in America, most people in America can't spell Ukraine. Not can't spell. Not most people in America can't spell Ukraine, but most people in America don't really know where
Know
Ukraine
where it
is, don't
is,
have a
yeah.
geographic reference for it, and don't really care. And I would say if you did a poll and if you went to some places, you might get, no, I haven't heard about that war. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah.
So we have to remember that.
But there are immediate needs and reasons for doing it. Biden has so far signed off, this is the official figures from the US, $14 billion in weapons to Ukraine. Recently, though, he's asked for another $33 billion, more than double
He hasn't asked.
in weapons.
The defense contractors have asked for those.
The defense contract.
Because they're saying, like, listen, we've got a lot of stock here. It's been sitting around for literally, in many cases, decades, not being used. We're shipping it over. It's old stuff. We're shipping it over to Ukraine, but we want to replace it with new stuff, and we want the new contracts.
But for all this to work, Congress has to sign off on it. Now, those congressmen, they don't just listen to their rich constituents like Lockheed and Raytheon. There is a response to public pressure. You have to have enough of that going on. You can't have total apathy out there. And in fact, the opposite, constituents, hammering them to not go along with this. It has a functional purpose for U.S. war needs right now. Like this $33 billion, if this is signed off, Ukraine will leapfrog most countries that the U.S. has given weapons and other forms of military aid to, in total figures since 1945. It will become fourth, I think I saw. Israel is still number one, and it's a long way before you catch up with Israel. But it's like, it's leapfrogging Pakistan, which has had billions given to it over decades, Tomorrow, the Lend-Lease Act, again, Biden didn't write it. It was written for him, yes, and contractors and lobbyists and blah, blah, blah. But for congressmen to rubber stamp it such that he can sign it tomorrow, pointedly on Victory Day in Russia, that's, and as the media has been careful to point out, that's the first time they've done they're rekindling a World War II thing, their Lend-Lease to, well, at the time it was to the USSR.
Yeah.
Against Germany, now it's to Ukraine, against Russia. Again, the political class, the purpose of the messaging, whether or not it's taking into population, whether or not they're sick of it, the politicians need to respond to constituents in order to for it all to work.
Lend-Lease, though, is better than just giving the money and giving the weapons without any strings attached, because Lend-Lease means you're on the hook. For Ukraine is on the hook. The Ukrainian people, the Ukrainian economy is on the hook for paying it back. I'm pretty sure Germany had debts, obviously, from the Second World War, but Russia, I think, stopped paying off the debts from Lend-Lease in 1945 and about 2007 or 2008. So it was like 60 years later. They were basically in debt to America for 60 years as a result of Lend-Lease. So it's good for business, like.
Big time. Biden went to Lockheed Martin plant yesterday. Can we play that one? I just sent it to you. Again, we know it's BS. Do most Americans care? Well, he's going to. A lot of people are employed by these companies. Let's see what he says.
You're making it possible for the Ukrainian people to defend themselves without us having to risk getting in a third world war by sending in American soldiers fighting Russian soldiers. My dad used to have an expression. He said, the only war worse than one that's intended is one that's unintended. You're allowing the Ukrainians to defend themselves. And quite frankly, they're making fools of the Russian military in many instances. A big part of the reason they've been able to keep up fighting and to make this war a strategic failure for Russia is because the United States, together our allies and partners, have had their back. The United States alone has committed more than 5,500 javelins to Ukraine. You're changing the nation. You really are. Add to that significant supplies from our allies and partners, as well as many thousands of other anti-tank and anti-air weapons, helicopters, armored vehicles, artillery, coastal defense systems. Before Russia attacked, We made sure Russia had javelins and other weapons to strengthen the defenses so Ukraine was ready
Ukraine.
for whatever happened. In the last 2 months, we continue to move even more resources and equipment at a rapid pace into Ukraine. We've made sure that there are no interruptions in the flow of equipment to Ukraine. Since Russia invaded Ukraine just over 2 months ago, we have sent more than $3 billion in security assistance to Ukraine. Alone, us, not counting our allies. And that money is a direct investment in defending freedom and democracy itself. Because if you don't stand up to dictators, history has shown us they keep coming. They keep coming.
All right, he didn't say it in that one. Just play that one there because this is the same place. And it's from a few days ago, March 4th. So 4 days ago he was there. Just play that.
They can hit targets up to 400 meters away and have a fire and forget capability. That means the person firing can, I know you know it, but it's for anybody who maybe listen, can change positions or take cover before that javelin even strikes home and strikes the target.
Like me.
In fact, they've been so important, there's even a story about Ukrainian parents naming their children, not a joke, their newborn child, Javelin or Javelina, not a joke.
So imagine going.
Actually, Ukrainian captured soldiers say the javelins are shite.
Yeah, I know. Well, that's perfect propaganda. But imagine going like it's obviously it's probably bullshit. But he says, no joke. This is serious. I've heard of this. I heard it somewhere. But imagine going to a weapons manufacturer that makes anti-tank weapons, and in order to encourage those people in their jobs producing anti-tank weapons that you're telling them are being sent to a country.
That really
that's a fight.
appreciates them.
That really appreciate it, but that the citizens of those countries are naming their children after the weapons that you're making. Well, how would you feel about that? I mean, I suppose I don't know what it'd be like to be in the head of an employee of a defense contractor, but would you feel proud about that? Have you any conscience whatsoever? Would you feel proud that like lethal weapons that you're making are being used? The name of them are being used to name children in a foreign country. Something very sick and
it's uniquely American.
It's uniquely American, just like Biden is. Fire and forget. That's what Biden does. Fire and forget. He fires off comments and then forgets what he said.
Does he boast that those javelinas can reach their targets from 400 meters away?
Yeah,
that's
400 meters.
That's
wow,
crap, isn't it, Scotty? Tell me that's
what?
That's nothing to brag about.
No, it's not. 400 meters is nothing.
No.
Yeah.
Oh Lord. In reality, of course, the javelins are being captured in droves because they don't have a chance to use them, or when they do use them, they're hitting tanks 10, 12 times, and it's not.
Yeah, they're old, or they don't fire. At least that's some of the reports. But again, it's consistent with the fact that America, all these weapons America is shipping, and so quickly and easily shipping, and so happily shipping to Ukraine, are old stock that haven't been necessarily maybe maintained so well, don't work so well, including the new shipments of howitzers and artillery that they're sending. I think one's called an M777 or whatever. It's basically an artillery gun. They're shipping those all, out of America, out of mothball storage.
That's been the case so far, but do you not get the sense from this massive declared ramp up in volume of production and in value of total stocks being shipped that they're going to send new stuff?
No.
Because they won't get there. Because Russia, of course, last week started hitting railway depots.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. And
some bridges in Western Ukraine.
Although Lend-Lease may make a change to that, but Ukraine isn't looking very good for paying back debts, you know what I mean? And down the line in the future,
But do you not get the impression, do you not get the impression, though, that the US doesn't care about that, and they're plugging into this? In terms of escalation, they're going further in with this.
Yeah, for money.
For money.
Primarily.
Despite knowing that they're not going to get much out of Ukraine unless they win. They have to actually capture territory. They have to do what they did in Syria.
It's ideological.
In northeast Syria.
I'll tell you where the money's coming from, and this is kind of indirectly. Put up that Twitter link, the first one I sent you, Scotty, Unholy Rom 3. It's the Twitter account. Just play that.
Oh, I saw.
Bro, how we going out to eat, trying to have us a nice little brunch? And well, okay, we did get a mimosa. We got some morning buns. We had some fried chicken biscuits and some chicken and waffle and a Topo Chico, a mother and child reunion. But I don't remember this. What's this? How she just charge us $1 for Ukraine? Ukraine ain't never sent me no dollar without asking me. Haiti you ever took $1 in the name of Haiti? Just without asking people, just go ahead and add it? Why I owe Ukraine $1? I ain't agree to this.
Because it's patriotic.
Bro, how we going?
So maybe most Americans have heard of Ukraine by now because it's coming out of there. It's on their bills.
I mean, obviously that's on a bill from a restaurant.
That's gone woke or something.
Or, yeah, that's adding that, but whatever. But it's coming out of taxpayers' pockets, basically. That's where all the money's coming from. So, in the end, the Fed can keep printing dollars and giving them to arms manufacturers to make weapons for Ukraine. And the people who will carry the can will be the American population.
Carry the can from one point of view, but from another, Lockheed, Raytheon, etc., getting massive contracts
Keeps a lot of people in
means
business.
the employees stay.
Yeah.
They might even get pay rises.
It's good for the
or
economy.
Pay.
Just in that sector, mind you.
I have. I think people should read this one in full. It's not very long. I'll just quote a bit from it. Put up this one from Mother John Scotty. About the volumes of weapons the US has and is planning to ship to Ukraine. Okay. Biden's $33 billion aid request for Ukraine is unlike anything we've ever seen. This is where I read that it's insane how Ukraine is now number 4 now in all-time sales of military aid. It says in the report, maybe you can find it, if Congress approves Biden's request, the U.S. government will have sent Ukraine
Second paragraph.
47 billion in less than a year, more money than all but a handful of countries have ever received in total from the U.S. Further on, there's a guy called, they quote Jeff Abramson, a senior fellow at the Arms Control Association who helped maintain the tracking sheet, the figures that this report produced. Quote from him, "The amount of weapons going to Ukraine at the pace it is going is spectacular. We're still in an escalatory phase of this war. There's so much going in, and it's not that big of an army." Now, he dropped it off there. They didn't quote him anymore on that. But it seemed to suggest an intimation from this guy who tracks U.S. weapons sales that he's like looking at the size of Ukraine's army, looking at the volume going in, and he's thinking, hang on, it doesn't add up. We're saturating Ukraine beyond its capacity to use this stuff.
That's money.
Okay.
That's financial. Offloading. You know, if you've got a bunch of weapons that have been stuck, like I said, in storage for decades because you haven't used them and you want rid of them because they're just costing you money effectively and they're not generating. The fact that they're there means you're not generating new contracts or new orders for them. Well, you want to find any country you can in the world to dump those weapons on. And you'll dump as many as, you know, you'll talk it up and say, oh, you know, you need a lot more than that and we're going to, it's almost a dumping ground for weapons, which again generates more income for defense contractors, which is good for the economy.
It literally
Good for
is.
the economy, Neil.
The military-industrial complex is, in large part, a tax base for the United States. They want people employed because they pay income tax, et cetera, et cetera. They are dependent on this system, and this is a boon. The Ukraine war is how the U.S. stays functional at all.
Well, and one of its main sectors, yeah. Throw up the Times Square JPEG, Scotty. This is for just referencing tomorrow, which is Victory Day celebrations in Russia. This is what Times Square had to say, i.e. this is what the American government effectively had to say about Victory Day tomorrow.
Oh,
May 9th, Russian victory, no, shame day. And May 9th is spattered in blood. So that's on display in Times Square. It's a shame day. Not Victory Day, shame day. That's what they want you to believe, but whatever.
crazy. of course, we know why, what they're getting at with the messaging and stuff, but it's horrifying when you step back and remember that it's about defeating the Nazi war machine, and so it's flipped in our time, where to mark that, to celebrate that, is the evil, and then the evil of the Nazis. That's not even mentioned. That's not even. And that's no one's talking about that. It's the evil of the Russians. It's hard to symbolically. I mean, Russia going into Ukraine to denazify it. It's like, okay, we have to counter that narrative, right? Let's just say he's making it up. In fact, we'll flip it on its head. He's the Hitler of today. His war machine is the Nazis, and you don't just score a propaganda victory here and now. You completely subvert the popular understanding, the common understanding that we're all born after that war had drilled into us as well. That just overlooks it. Like, again, another unintended consequence of this. For what about the sub-religion that came out of the sub-secular religion that came out of World War II, the Holocaust, the Shoah? You know, in France, in the United States as well, school kids until today have it drilled into the Holocaust was the worst thing ever, the worst thing ever, the worst thing ever. Never happen again, you know, over and over. And then the current propaganda needs of the day come along and just completely underwrite and pull the rug out from under it. You know?
Yeah. There was another, Snake Island was in the in the news the past couple of days. Did you see that? Snake Island, you know, the famous Snake Island?
Yeah. Of the FU Russia, that didn't happen.
Yeah, yeah, it was in the news game because so basically the Russians set up a they obviously occupied Snake Island. It's only a tiny little island. It's kind of strategically important, but it's a tiny little island off the coast of Odessa, and I think they had an anti-missile system on there, and it was attacked. I think it was attacked. People might have seen video going around. It's on the Telegram channels and some of it's on Twitter as well, where it was attacked by the Ukrainians supposedly, and it was hit. But I think it was at the time it was the only thing really on the island. It was just the group that were operating the anti-ship anti-aircraft or air defense missile system, Russian air defense missile system on this island, and it was hit by a Ukrainian missile or Ukrainian probably a drone attack or whatever, and then I think there's video also of two planes flying in and kind of just bombing the island really at a really low altitude or whatever. And it's kind of funny because I don't have the video here, but it's the two planes. It's kind of an infrared camera and two planes fly in. You see the explosions going off, but the second one, they're really low, and it looks like it was kind of dangerous because the second one probably kind of flew through the explosion of the first one. Anyway, so the Ukrainians, emboldened by that, decided to try and reoccupy the island. Right, so they landed. I think there was a ship in the area, a Ukrainian ship in the area. They landed an Mi-8 helicopter, and with a bunch of troops to kind of take the island, and then those two planes that had bombed it just before were still flying around. So they figured that because they hit this Russian anti-missile system, they could go in there with impunity. But then it turns out that the Russians shot down the two aircraft, sank the Ukrainian ship, and destroyed the helicopter that had landed with the troops. And I have that video. Put up the Mi-8, that MP4. Scotty, but the strange thing, before you just watch this is on Twitter and stuff, and you see this on Twitter as being reported as Ukrainian. A Ukrainian drone, again, I keep using these drones, the Turkish drones. Ukrainian drone bombs a Russian Mi-8 helicopter with troops on it, but you can just see it here. I think the notice there is the three guys in front of the plane. There's one moving there, a couple of guys beside. There's a guy to the right as well. They're basically lying down. So this is like a party that has come out of the plane. Now, this is an island that was that the Ukrainians clearly are trying to take back, and then that happens. Now, that's not a drone, the kind of bombs that the Russian drones or the Turkish drones can carry. That's not. They don't carry that size of ordnance.
Yeah.
That's like maybe like a 250-pound bomb or something like that.
Like an Iskander or something.
Yeah. A missile with a 250 kilogram warhead or something like that. So that's the island, But it's just it's just another example of the disinformation that the Ukrainians put out there. You know what I mean?
Turning abject defeat into
a
propaganda victory.
Yeah, they just switched around. And the fact of the matter is, the Russians were on Snake Island. They had a anti-aircraft missile system on the island. That was about it. That missile system got hit, and then the Ukrainians landed, and they're the ones who are in that video. It landed with a helicopter, and they're trying to take it back. That's why they're fanning out and lying down and stuff. The Russians wouldn't do that on an island that they actually own, that they actually have already occupied, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's clearly a Ukrainian helicopter that got destroyed. And again, then the Russian Ministry of Defense put out a circular saying that happened, plus those 2 aircraft that had just bombed the island were very quickly afterwards shot down, and a ship that was in the area was sunk.
Huh.
Sinked. So anyway, it's just another detail in the ongoing...
That's Snake Island. That's not far from Transnistria.
Right.
And Ukraine's southwest. Did you mention last week there were a number of incidents in Transnistria, drone attacks?
I mentioned, in terms of it possibly being an area where it would kind of expand. But the problem is the Ukrainians would like to expand, would like to invade Transnistria in order to open a kind of another front, because there are Russian peacekeepers there, officially peacekeepers there, but they won't do it because Moldova does not want them to do it. And Transnistria is, as far as Moldova is concerned, still part of Moldova, and the Moldova government does not want Transnistria to be brought into this conflict, although the Ukrainians would like to do that, like I said, in order to, pull Russian attention in that direction,
You just it was only a news flash.
Yeah.
And it was about 10 days ago. It was a couple of days worth. Washington Post headline: Mysterious attacks in Transnistria add further intrigue to Ukraine war. The following day, Kiev invited Moldova to invade Transnistria.
Right.
You capture it before. That can be used against us, kind of thing. Moldova said, not a chance. And that's been the end of it since then. So Moldova, no spread of the war there at this point. What do you think, though? On April 28th, maybe you saw that, the head of the Russian Foreign Intelligence Service, that's Narishkin, announced that Washington and Warsaw were preparing a plan to establish Poland's control over its, quote, historical possessions in Ukraine. Do you think the Polish like that? On just a few days ago, actually, President Duda of Poland gave this speech. I think it was on a Polish national holiday about Ukraine and Poland having no border and being brotherly nations.
It's kind of setting the scene in a way for possibly when Russia, it exposes the fact that they expect that Russia will achieve its military objectives, as they keep on talking about, which is, and which I think I mentioned previously, taking about a third of the country under full Russian control, i.e. a third from the east, a third of the way over the country, which includes down to Odessa and along all of the Black Sea coast, basically, and all of Donbass, and a bit further inland, westwards. And when that happens, then it's possible that NATO would be a de facto split of Ukraine and into separate countries, and in order to prevent Russia from creeping further westwards, instead of NATO pushing eastwards up against Russia, this would be a case of Russia potentially creeping or pushing westwards up against Poland, right? Russia's goal kind of is to flip the narrative, flip the script, basically, and instead of having Ukraine as a virulently anti-Russian country right on Russia's borders, it wants to have Ukraine as a profoundly pro-Russian, militarized along Russian lines country on Europe's borders.
Right. except for
How do you
a
like
rump,
them apples?
except for a rump that is Western Ukraine. And
Right,
that's-
but if left to their devices, they may,
Yeah.
may think about, or eventually as things pan out, it may become possible for all of Ukraine to fall, new government obviously, and then it to be denazified in full, and it to be pro-Russian. So in that scenario, the Poles and the EU, and it's a US plan, probably a US conceived scenario, where they wouldn't necessarily I don't know why they're talking about incorporating it as these are historical lands. That's almost like taking it away from Ukraine, but I mean more like it would become shared between Ukraine and Poland, with Poland/NATO providing defense, or what I mean. It's obviously very complicated, and it's to be seen how things pan out. But that's what they're envisioning. By saying that, they're envisioning the partition of Ukraine.
yeah.
And Western Ukraine being in some form or other under
Yeah.
Western government, like NATO protection, political, military, whatever protection.
Yeah.
So they're exposing what they know to be the truth, really.
They're tacitly acknowledging reality,
Yes.
and yet they dump more and more weapons to prolong it.
Yeah. To make lots of money.
To make lots of money, but also to extract the highest cost possible.
From Russia.
Putin was prompted to warn again. This is last week, the week before's news, but the statement is strong, isn't it? He was speaking to some group in St. Petersburg and talked about lightning fast response from Moscow if countries continue interfering in Ukraine. The exact quote is, if someone intends to intervene into the ongoing events in Ukraine from the outside and creates unacceptable strategic threats for us, then they should know that our response to these strikes will be swift, lightning fast.
Mm-hmm.
And we won't brag. We have the tools for this. We will use them if needed.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe we've already got that this week with the number of strikes right across Western Ukraine against railway sites and key bridges, one near Odessa.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe that's all that's needed for now. It's hard to say. It sounds like when Putin says something like that, you're thinking, oh Jesus, that's a major. It prompted people actually a flurry of BS, probably BS, because it's predicting tomorrow that May 9th, Putin would use his annual speech at the victory parade on Red Square to declare a full mobilization and a massive escalation
Yeah,
in the war.
and then I think Shoigu or somebody came out and said, no, we're not going to do that. That's bullshit. So, nah. They just make stuff up and present it as fact. Throw up the Reuters.com article just to change tack a little bit, although it's kind of related. 25 million tons of grain stuck in Ukraine, says the UN Food Agency. So, yeah, that's to be expected. 25 million tons of grain are stuck in Ukraine and unable to leave the country due to infrastructure challenges and blocked Black Sea ports, including Mariupol, according to the UN. The blockages are seen as a factor behind high food prices, which hit a record high in March. Well, why don't you stop waging war in that country then? No.
Yeah.
Why doesn't NATO stop prolonging the war? Well, we don't care about food price,
Why does NATO prevent
food shortages and...
Zelensky from suing for peace?
Yeah, and of course, go to the next one, CNN. Just for the CNN spin on that article, on that story, Russians steal vast amounts of Ukrainian grain and equipment, threatening this year's harvest. So it's not that it's just blocked as a result of the war, but Russians are actually, according to CNN, Russians are stealing Ukrainian grain and gorging themselves on it. Like raw wheat and equipment, not only equipment, but tractors and combine harvesters. They're putting them on flatbed trucks and shipping them over the border into Russia to sell them on the black market to fund their failing military campaign. That's all they can do, selling tractors to the highest bidder. I think I saw one on the local buy and sell website.
Yeah.
Ukrainian tractor going cheap. And it was a Russian selling it. Kind of raise funds for the war effort, Russian forces are stealing farm equipment and thousands of tons of grain from Ukrainian farmers in areas they have occupied, which is nonsense because the areas Russia has occupied is so far primarily in Donbass, and Russia is in the process of, actively in the process of building back up the areas of the Donbass economy that has been destroyed after 8 years of war by Ukraine on the Donbass. So the idea that they would be stealing the grain from the people that and they're also providing a lot of humanitarian aid. So what, they're stealing it and while at the same time providing humanitarian aid, how do you square that? Of course, it's CNN, so it's complete bullshit.
Well, I've had the response from people on Twitter and elsewhere. Oh, but that humanitarian aid they're handing out to people from the back of trucks and stuff, that's humanitarian aid they stole from the Ukrainian side. So yeah, it looks good that they're helping people in
from where?
Mariupol, but they stole it.
Stole it from where? From the areas they occupy,
Yeah.
which is the Donbass, which is where Mariupol is. So they're stealing the grain from people in the Donbass to give it to the people in Donbass. Is that stealing? If I steal your stuff and give it back to you, have I stole it? Or have I just got it together and given it to you because you can't get it together yourself?
The latter.
Right. Again, CNN, it's horseshit. Of course, CNN headlines, well, dozens feared dead after Russia bombed school shelter, bombing, dog shelters, bombing old people's homes, all that kind of stuff. It's just hardcore BS propaganda. But yeah, supply chain issues. If you do supply chain problems or supply chain backlog or whatever on Google or any search engine, there's a lot of stuff from the past few days, but of course it's ongoing. Apple forecasts up to 8 billion hit from supply chain problems. Under Armour, Under Armour, the clothes manufacturer, expects protracted supply chain challenges due to freight costs, capacity issues, and growing disruption from COVID-19 spread in China. So freight costs, one of the things to say about this is like freight companies this year are posting massive profits. Oil companies this year are posting massive profits. So there's a glut going on in the areas that are being blamed for supply chain, like end user supply chain problems, like you and me not being able to get certain items is as a result of at least partly as a result of freight shipping companies and oil companies putting the price up, or just general prices going up for you and me. Not necessarily us not being able to get certain things, although that's included, but first and foremost, the price of things going up is directly correlated with a massive spike in profits for companies that are responsible for supplying those things that we're paying more money for. So basically, when we pay more money for them, it's going to international shipping companies and oil companies and others. So when you look at it, it's like, so couldn't they just take like less profits and then, which means that the average end user wouldn't have to pay so much? No, shut up.
Shut up.
Shut up and take your vaccine.
Couldn't the government mandate this or that? Some forms of price controls. Shut up, you commie. Well, hang on a second. The government was able to mandate all kinds of things for 2 years. Very successfully. We now know they can do that when they have to.
Yep.
But suddenly they can't again. The one common denominator connecting the pandemic with today is the unbelievable explosion in the, what's it called? The Gini coefficient, that measure of the gap between the poorest and the richest in any given country. I mean, the wealth transfer during the pandemic was like, it was already high. It's been, and it grows every year and every decade, especially in the West. But after the pandemic, it was unbelievable. And that continues. That's the same trend that's going on. Behind all the narrative, behind all the reasons, behind all the agendas, that's the key indicator. And that's the sign of, that's the real sign of the times. It's like, whether it's because they subconsciously worry or fear. I don't think these people fear much, but they sense the good times might end soon.
Yeah.
So they become that bit more ruthless and take that bit more and price gouge.
Yep.
And who knows what they do, kill off competitors and stuff. Like we saw with Gazprom executives. I mean, there might be an element of that going on. It's pure. It's not necessarily get Russia tactics with those two Gazprom executives who died. There could also be like just simple, pure naked dog eat dog stuff going on there as well. That is at the end of the day, that's the sign of the times, because historically this happens every time. It is a law of nature, so to speak, an economic law that is hard baked. When things get messy, when social division and chaos increases, when wars and civil wars increase and revolutions come on scene and people are angry, etc., etc., the one thing that they all have in common, behind all the reasons that are given at the kind of surface level, whether it was the fall of Rome or more recently the fall of the Ottoman Empire or the collapse of the medieval period that led to the Black Death, which kind of was the last thing that happened. The first thing that happened was massive wealth inequality. They'd been very stable period, medieval Europe, where there was generally not that much of a gap between rich and poor, but people have tracked it. They found enough receipts that could be receipts from trade between companies, between lord and landlord and serf, or simple receipts from going to the market. And there's enough that you can actually plug it into computer programmers, and then you see the same sharp, just before calamity. It's like people sense it. And those who already have a lot sense it as well, and they act more so
because of fear of losing it. The more you have, the more you fear losing.
So that's how you have the lens now to understand Bill Gates at this time. Did he suddenly become a freaking angel and want to give away all his money, or did he invest smart? And he's selling the product, you know, the pandemic, and he's getting richer and richer from it. It's just one example. All of the billionaires, I mean, are trillionaires now, some of them. Look at Amazon's profits from the pandemic, et cetera, et cetera.
Go ahead.
Did you see Bill Gates is in the news again recently?
Yeah, because he said...
he's decided that we may have exaggerated.
Yeah, maybe. But like, that's so predictable. Like, I knew that was going to happen. I was just waiting, and it was torturous to kind of have to wait until it was all done and dusted and nobody cared anymore and there's nothing you could do about it, to have all of these statements from the same sources who are telling you to be terrified and hide in your house to come around now and say, well, actually, yeah, it wasn't so bad. It's like, but they justify it by saying, well, we didn't know at the time, so we went full scare tactics in order to terrify people. But if people don't have an understanding of how to read if they don't understand the nature of those people, the nature of the system under which we live, the nature of the people that populate politics and business, and behind the scenes, however far you want to go, if people don't understand the nature of those people, then you're totally unable to interpret what's being said to you, or interpret or understand the way that you're being manipulated, the way you're being lied to, and that these people have an agenda to control you and to manipulate you for their own gain. If you don't understand that, you're screwed. You're going to take everything they say at face value. But like right from the get-go, we were like, yeah, this is bullshit, but we just have to suffer through it until, and then also suffer after the fact, whenever all of the statements come out officially saying it was all bullshit and what we were saying at the time was true, but no one's listening anymore. No one cares anymore. And there's nothing you can do about it anymore.
February 2020. Someone go back and look at our shows right here. We said it's not much worse than the flu.
Yeah.
2.5 years. Oh, censored, banned, shut up. 2.5 years later, Bill Gates to Fareed Zakaria, whatever his name is, that CFO guy at the CNN. Yeah.
It was kind of like
it wasn't much worse than the flu.
Yeah. And it would have killed the same people. Those people that died, they were going to die anyway. They wouldn't have survived much longer anyway because they had other illnesses and blah, blah, blah. What about in the US? We never talk about internal American politics. Roe versus Wade. What do you know about Roe versus Wade, Niall?
Roe versus Wade was a Supreme Court ruling in the 1960s or early 70s that overturned some states' ban on abortion. Anyway, it opened the way.
Basically, legalized abortion.
It legalized abortion nationwide, I think, regardless of what states individual states had previously ruled. So yeah, that ushered in the modern that led to, some figures are insane from America, 60, 70 million abortions, something like that. And at the time, it was for this reason or that reason or this reason. But those reasons just became so insanely wide and liberal, ultra-liberal, to the point where there are post-term abortions. Do you know that? In California, I think you can actually have the baby terminated after birth. I hope that's not a rumor. I read that somewhere, or maybe it's in the pipeline.
It's not really an abortion at that point, is it?
No,
it's just murder. But
so, what did the Supreme Court's rule?
Well, it was leaked by someone. Leaked by someone, probably in the Democratic Party, that the Supreme Court justices had been getting together and were planning to overturn Roe versus Wade.
Right.
To make, of course, I think it's probably fairly unlikely that they were going to do that, although maybe to some extent, I don't know exactly because it hasn't actually come out even yet, but the leak was the news this week, basically, that this was going to happen, and got lots of people all worked up. All the leftist kind of extreme lefty types got all worked up about, my body, my choice, and how dare a bunch of men, however many of them, get together and decide what it's right, what a woman can and can't do with her body, blah, 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 blah. But it's funny how the whole abortion topic is made such an issue. Such an issue is made of it, when already on the books in most countries and in the hearts and minds of the average person, it's understood what, that there's a solution to this supposed thorny issue that can't be resolved, and of course, if it's presented in extreme black and white, like full abortion up to full, or abortion up to full term, or no abortion whatsoever in any circumstances, because it's absolute murder no matter what stage. There's no meeting between those two positions, but there is somewhere in the middle.
Of course, and the US over the decades has gradually driven itself / been driven to these extremes, and it's one or the other. So this has already produced results. The Democrat Party, Chuck Schumer and others, are out there attending rallies, effectively calling on the mob to go and threaten the homes.
They already have. They
already have. They go to Kavanaugh's house.
Yeah.
And we have ways and means. And as Tucker Carlson pointed out in one of his monologues last week, ways and means. Hang on a second. The Supreme Court justices are appointed for life. You cannot have them fired. That's the tenet everyone agrees with in the United States. You don't replace them unless they themselves voluntarily step down. So you're threatening physical harm against them. That's the
intimidation.
It's the kind of thing that will be in the end, this will be the quote to come back to the top of our show. There won't be a nuclear holocaust in the United States. There's going to be such internal division that things will collapse in stages, in places, first here, first there. I can see a point where judges are... I know of a country where judges are killed. Ukraine. Since 2014, Ukraine is in such a state that kind of thing has happened. It's unofficially sanctioned from someone on high to have that judge whacked because, well, obviously that doesn't last forever. Russia has kind of come in, if you look at it this way, it's come in to save Ukraine for real from the interminable fate of just slowly falling apart and rotting. So, because that's the trajectory it was on. The United States probably, like we said at the start, won't have someone come in and cut off the head of the beast or cut out the cancer that's rotting at it. It's out there on its own geographically in the North Atlantic. The worst fate that awaits the United States is such extreme internal division that things collapse, degrade, and progressively quicker.
There's no sanity there anymore in the public discourse, and it's been fueled by the media and by division in government. You know that although government isn't divided, right? The Washington establishment is a singular entity, but they put on a show of being on two separate sides, and it's true for most of them. There's the odd one like Ron Paul and stuff like that who are genuine, kind of truth tellers and want the best for want to solve problems. But the vast majority of the politicians are just in their two camps. But the purpose of them being in those two camps, despite the fact that they're actually unified as government in opposition to the people, the purpose of them having those two camps is to project that difference and those differences onto the population and to help to divide the population against each other. And that's what's happening.
Yeah.
So it's irresponsible
It's
government,
totally-
psychopathic, pathocratic government that's causing the divisions, ultimately that's fueling the divisions within the country.
They think they're so smart. They think like, okay, you guys Republicans, you go hard black on this issue, and we'll go hard white, and secretly we'll meet in the middle somewhere. But in the meantime, divide and conquer, right? And then on another issue, Ukraine, it's 100% they're all united behind foreign policy usually.
Yeah.
And it's become acceptable. This is the way to rule. That this is sustainable, and these guys can't see it. They can't. I look at the United States and I go, you may be richer, but you don't look much different to me right now than Ukraine. The civil strife. Again, people will be fortunate if there's enough political will among some group of people to start a civil war, because a civil war would at least be, it might drag on for years like America's last civil war, but at least it would be a fairly discreet ending and a possible chance to reset and thus save what's left of the United States at that point. But they're not even going to have that kind of opportunity. It's worse than that. It's like extreme cancer.
Yeah. It reminds me of that quote by Henry David Thoreau. There are 1,000 hacking at the branches of evil to one who's hacking at the root, or striking the root. And that's the problem, hacking at the branches of evil or the pseudo problems or pseudo evils of the day, the ideological positions that people take, and it's just superficial stuff that isn't really meaningful, and nobody is actually pointing out the problems which the root of evil in the world today. And if we focus on America, then the root of evil is effectively in the Washington establishment and what they are doing to the country and to the people there. But what they don't realize as well is that they're undermining the support base that keeps them propped up in their privileged positions. You know what I mean? They're kind of cutting the branch that they're sitting on in a certain sense, and profiting through doing that, and maintaining themselves in power and thereby maintaining their own personal profit from being in power, because that's a big part of what a politician is all about, is to enrich themselves. And they're just gorging themselves on it, and while doing that, they're undermining the foundation that allows them to have that position of power, and the whole thing will come crashing down eventually. And
In a slow motion wreck.
Yeah.
But I think it's going to speed up. I don't think that this can go on for decades. It's years out, I think. I mean, the US, another development in the United States last week, this new disinformation SAR.
Yeah.
Like,
It's a joke. Like,
left or right, it doesn't matter. Like, everyone agrees in the US, like, freedom of speech is like First Amendment, First Amendment. Like, you can't do that. You don't do that, But you do that if you realize I don't know how they would perceive it. It's somehow felt that they are out of sync with the will of the people, that they are not ruling in line with, that they have already crossed the line, that they are no longer legitimate. You know what I'm hinting at here vis-a-vis last year's election, but
right.
a disinformation SAR, Ministry of Truth, people are calling it, Rand Paul himself included. That's exactly what it is. The United States, it's one thing, like in Europe, it's no better. In Europe, the European Union does that kind of thing by decree. They can go over the heads of national governments here and just block all Russian media from the airwaves in Europe, which have had varying degrees of success in doing. You can still find it online.
But Neil, don't worry, because Jen Psaki is no longer... Don't worry about disinformation, because Jen Psaki is going to...
No.
Where's she going?
No,
where's she
where's
going
she
to?
going?
MSNBC, and there's a new person. Let's hear from the
I'm going to miss Chucky.
Chucky. Yeah. Chuck it up there. Chucky it up there. It's not on the screen. We're not seeing anything, Scotty.
Been a bit of an exciting day around here.
Yeah. Well, we don't need that part.
Hey, hi everyone. Been a bit of an exciting day around here. So, before I get to the briefing, I just want to start by, I'm going to cry. Okay. Whew. I want to talk about my friend Corinne. You've got to come up here. So, I just want to take the opportunity to celebrate and congratulate my friend, my colleague, my partner in truth, Corinne Jean-Pierre,
Partner in
next
truth,
White
yeah.
House press secretary.
In partner truth, they're going to be. She said at some point that they're going to be.
I understand how important it is for so
Committing
many
to
people out there,
bringing the truth
so many different
from the
communities that
podium.
I stand on their shoulders, and I have
Yeah.
been throughout my career.
Okay.
And so it
We
is an
can-
honor and a privilege to be behind this podium in
The
about a
main
week or so when Jen
thing
is ready.
is obviously not
and
to be.
that,
stop it there.
that is
The main thing
something
is
that
No,
that
you have to let her talk. She's black and LGBTQ plus.
she's lesbian,
God.
and
By God, I'm going to let her
honor,
talk.
and
No, I'm not.
but yeah, it's obviously
Toxic male.
obviously, that's an issue that I would, I stay away from basically, because I'm not going to turn around and say that, that it's a cynical move to put a black woman in as White House spokesperson.
We shouldn't
because
care.
we shouldn't even care. It shouldn't be an issue, but they're making an issue
America
of it.
is a black country
Right.
from its foundation, for God's sake. It's part black.
Well, partly, but 15
From
15
1600s.
15% of the population, but it's so fine you can have a black president, and again, fine. If you want to be representative of the people in the country, you should have a black president, a Hispanic president, whatever, spokesperson, who cares? But like you're saying, they make a big issue of it. They shove it in people's faces as if to say, this is amazing because it's the first time we've ever had a black White House spokesperson, and isn't this awesome? We're finally striking a blow against...
They had a black president for
I know.
8 years.
Yeah, I know, yeah. But anyway, she's lesbian and
What?
black, so we should all celebrate today. No, we shouldn't care, like you said. It shouldn't be an issue at all.
That's like, they had the first redhead as well.
Yeah, first Chucky.
First ginger.
Yep. Did we have any... Why is she wearing white? It's triggering me. Okay, that's a good point, yeah. She is wearing white. I wasn't triggered by that. Ew, black Chucky. Oh
You're
my
blind
God.
to that kind of thing.
I am. I'm
Yeah.
colorblind. I need a mentor to expose my white, subconscious white racism, or subconscious racism, whatever.
Do you have other U.S. news?
No.
I managed to tune it out the last while.
No, there hasn't been much going on there, really, to be honest, of any note. I mean, again,
Other than
of
the usual shrill.
the usual blah,
Yeah.
blah, blah. There's been a bit about Pfizer. Pfizer released 80,000 documents. 80,000 pages, sorry, of documents. And people were saying, it exposed the fact that they knew that in the trials, a lot of people had died in the trials, but it wasn't. It was actually the first 3 months of the rollout of the vaccine that 1,243 or something people had died out of X millions, whatever, that had actually received the vaccine in the first. But you don't even need... I mean, I don't think there's going to be any smoking gun in that respect. People are looking for smoking guns in terms of Pfizer knew this, that, or the other. But... It's all already out there. All the information that undermines the official narrative about vaccines is already out there and has been out there for many months now. You know what I mean? We've talked about it many times on the show, obviously, in the way that it was, the whole COVID pandemic business was overplayed. Bill Gates himself has stated that it was overplayed and overstated. The vaccines have been proven to be not the lifesavers that they were. They're not necessary for children. They're not necessary for the average healthy adult. They don't stop you contracting the disease. They don't stop you spreading it. They may reduce severity of it in people who are very vulnerable, but that's about it. That's where it's at. I mean, it's all out there already. So it was a big con. It was a big con in the context of the way that they presented it and the way that it actually is. That doesn't mean that mRNA vaccines don't actually help some people or don't provide some immunity. But again, mRNA vaccines are an untested on large human population, untested medicine, and it was very dangerous to throw it out like that to the entire globe.
Against the coronavirus.
Yeah.
Like the flu, notoriously difficult to vaccinate against successfully. They knew that, but...
Yeah. Well, it's not even a vaccine, because technical description of a vaccine is something that technically vaccines up until now stop you getting sick and stop you, like for the most part, stop you getting sick and stop you spreading it. This mRNA vaccine, experimental, they call it gene therapy, let's say, did not do either of those two things. And they admitted it, so whatever. Yeah, it's just one more thing. It just, that's water under the bridge, and Ukraine will be water under the bridge, and the next thing will come along, and that'll be, and eventually hopefully it'll get to a denouement at some point, where all the bullshit stops and people start to wake up and realize, we're heading in the wrong direction. And hopefully it won't be before the cliff edge. There's no point in saying you're heading in the wrong direction as you're falling off the cliff face, Ideally, you should come to that realization slightly before the cliff edge.
I don't know. I can see a lot of hashtag I'm standing on the cliff edge as they're falling off.
Yeah. Any Chucky? Yeah. The Ukrainians are standing strong against Hitler, Putin, Wayne Nelson. Yes, they are. Absolutely, totally agree with that. Well, we didn't get any questions this week, so people were just helping me out last week with all their questions, right? I work at a vitamin store, and there's a huge drop in sales of pregnancy supplements the last few months. Huh. Everybody's getting an abortion?
No.
Everybody's rushing to get abortions before they ban them?
I think pregnancy rates dropped significantly during the pandemic. I think I saw that. There were a few reports where people were talking it up. In some locales, it increased, and it was kind of like, yay, people are at home, so there's more, baby making going on. But actually, overall, birth rates are down.
Yeah.
And that happens. There are long-term historical studies to show they think the reason, in quotes, for it is that women in particular, when they get a negative sense of the forecast of the coming future, they just it's not they stop having sex. They just
don't want to bring a child into the world.
They don't get pregnant as much.
Oh, they don't,
anywhere
like
near
almost
as much.
from
Almost
biological
imperative
type thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. I think we've done this one to death today. No pun intended. Yeah. Hope you enjoyed it. Hope you enjoyed it. Hope your spirit animal enjoyed this week's show as well, as much as obviously enjoyed last week's show. Hasn't said very much this week either, but I'm sure has been thinking quite a lot about what we've been saying.
What's that? Joe was mean to you.
No, he wasn't. Not at all. That's why he's back this week. If I was mean to him last week, is it him or her? It's a Z, is it?
It's a Z.
Z. If I was mean to Z last week, he wouldn't be here. Z wouldn't be here. I can't do that. Z wouldn't be here this week. Anyway, yeah. So, we'll leave it there for this week, folks. Thanks for watching, commenting. Exit strategy for U.S. residents.
Inland. You've got a vast continent. They won't all be doomed. Maybe get out of cities, large cities.
Dig a hole and jump into it. Yeah. No, you don't need an exit strategy. Just keep your wits about you. Yeah. So, thanks, guys, for listening, watching, whatever. We hope you enjoyed the show. We'll be back next week with another one, of course, on whatever's been going on between now and then. And thanks for commenting. And don't forget to smash all the buttons, as you are meant to do. So, yeah. Have a good day, evening, afternoon, night, wherever you are. See you later.
Till next week. Bye.
Can't stop the signal, Mel.